Have you ever wondered how a small act of kindness could change someone's life forever? The winter wind howled through the empty streets of Oakville, a quaint town nestled in the rolling hills of the countryside. Snow had been falling relentlessly for days, blanketing the town in a thick white carpet that muffled every sound, except the occasional creak of branches heavy with frost. Most residents had retreated to the warmth of their homes, huddled around fireplaces and steaming mugs of cocoa. Not everyone had a cozy place to call home. On the outskirts of town, in a narrow alley between two abandoned storefronts, an old man named Frank Thompson shivered inside a threadbare sleeping bag. Once a respected carpenter, Frank had fallen on hard times after his wife's passing in a series of unfortunate events. At 73, he found himself homeless, his weathered face etched with lines of worry and fatigue. As the temperature plummeted, Frank's breaths came in ragged gasps, each one more painful than the last. The bitter cold seeped into his bones, and he felt his consciousness slipping away as the snow slowly covered him like a cruel blanket. Meanwhile, across town, a small golden retriever puppy wandered the deserted streets. No more than 4 months old, his once fluffy coat was matted and dirty from weeks of living on his own. His ribs showed through his skin, and his paws left faint bloody prints in the snow where the ice had cut into his tender pads. Yet despite his dire circumstances, a spark of determination burned in his warm brown eyes. This little pup had survived against all odds, and tonight, fate had something extraordinary in store for him. The puppy's nose twitched as he caught a faint scent on the wind. Something human, tinged with desperation and fading life. Following his instincts, he padded down the empty sidewalks until he reached the alley where Frank lay motionless, nearly buried in snow. The pup whimpered softly, nudging the old man's face with his cold, wet nose. When there was no response, he let out a sharp, urgent bark. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the puppy's eyes darted around frantically until they landed on a glowing sign in the distance. The Oakville police station. Summoning every ounce of strength left in his tiny body, he took off running towards the light. Inside the station, a handful of officers were gathered around a coffee pot, grateful for the quiet night. Suddenly, the front door burst open with a gust of icy wind, and the golden retriever puppy stumbled in, covered in snow and shaking from exhaustion. Officer Sarah Miller, a compassionate woman in her late 20s, was the first to react. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed, kneeling down to examine the trembling pup. But before she could reach out to comfort him, the puppy did something extraordinary. He rose up on his hind legs and pressed his front paws together, as if in prayer. The room fell silent as the officers stared in disbelief. Officer Tom Jenkins, a gruff veteran of the force, chuckled nervously. "Well, I'll be damned. Looks like we've got ourselves a praying pup." But Sarah sensed there was more to it. "No," she said firmly, locking eyes with the desperate animal. "He's trying to tell us something." As if confirming her words, the puppy barked loudly and dashed back to the door, looking over his shoulder with pleading eyes. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Come on," she called to her colleagues, grabbing her heavy coat. "We need to follow him." 2 other officers, Mike Chen and Lisa Rodriguez, joined Sarah as they plunged into the howling storm. The golden retriever led them through winding streets, his small form barely visible against the swirling snow. Finally, he veered sharply into the alley and stopped, pawing at a snow-covered lump. Sarah's heart sank as she recognized the shape of a person. She rushed forward, brushing away the snow, to reveal Frank's pale, motionless face. With trembling fingers, she felt for a pulse. "He's alive," she shouted, but barely. "We need an ambulance now." Mike radioed for emergency services while Lisa stripped off her jacket to cover Frank. The puppy pressed his small body against the old man's chest, as if trying to share what little warmth he had left. His own frame shook violently, but he refused to leave Frank's side. Minutes later, the wail of sirens cut through the storm. Paramedics arrived, carefully lifting Frank onto a stretcher. The puppy whined and tried to jump up, clearly unwilling to be separated from the man he had saved. "Let him come," Sarah insisted, scooping up the shivering pup. "He found him. He's the reason this man has a chance." In the ambulance, the golden retriever curled up next to Frank, his trembling slowly subsiding as the vehicle raced towards Oakville General Hospital. Hours passed in a blur of beeping machines and hushed medical conversations. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, Frank's eyes fluttered open. The first thing he saw was a pair of warm brown eyes gazing at him intently. The puppy curled up on the edge of his hospital bed. Tears welled up in Frank's eyes as he weakly reached out a hand. The puppy inched closer, gently licking his fingers, before once again rising on his hind legs and pressing his paws together in that remarkable gesture. Then, as if his mission was finally complete, he collapsed into Frank's arms with a contented sigh. From the doorway, Sarah watched the scene unfold, her own eyes glistening with emotion. She knew she had witnessed something truly miraculous that night. Word of the heroic puppy spread like wildfire through Oakville. Local news stations picked up the story, running headlines like "Golden Guardian Angel," "Stray Puppy Saves Homeless Man from Freezing Death." The community, once oblivious to Frank's plight, suddenly rallied around him. Visitors flocked to the hospital, bringing gifts, warm clothes, and offers of support for both Frank and his four-legged savior. The puppy, now affectionately named Chance by the hospital staff, refused to leave Frank's side. He curled up on the old man's lap during physical therapy sessions, trotted alongside his wheelchair in the hallways, and greeted every visitor with a friendly wag of his tail. As Frank's health improved, a new worry set in. Where would he go once discharged? But the people of Oakville weren't about to let their local heroes down. Sarah spearheaded a fundraising campaign, and within weeks, enough money was raised to secure Frank a small but comfortable apartment on Maple Street. It wasn't luxurious, but it was warm, safe, and most importantly, pet-friendly. The day Frank and Chance moved into their new home was a celebration for the entire town. Neighbors lined the street, cheering as the unlikely pair crossed the threshold together. Frank knelt down, his eyes brimming with tears, and hugged Chance tightly. "You saved my life, boy," he whispered, "and I promise you'll never be alone or hungry again." In the months that followed, both Frank and Chance flourished. Frank's carpentry skills found new life, as he began crafting small wooden toys and furniture for the community. People would stop by his workshop, not just to buy his creations, but to visit with the miracle duo of Maple Street. Chance grew into a handsome adult dog, always by Frank's side, wearing a bright red collar that Sarah had given him as a gift. Their story touched hearts far beyond Oakville. A children's book author wrote an illustrated tale of their adventure, which became a bedtime favorite for kids across the country. Frank and Chance were invited to schools and community events, where Frank would share their story of hope and second chances. Years passed, and the bond between man and dog only deepened. On warm summer evenings, you could often find them sitting on a bench in the town square, Chance's head resting contentedly on Frank's lap. Children would gather around, eager to pet the gentle dog, and hear Frank recount their tale. "Remember," Frank would say, his voice soft but full of conviction, "Chance had nothing. No home, no family, barely enough food to survive. But he gave everything he had to save a stranger. That's the purest kind of love there is." And Chance, as if understanding every word, would look up at Frank with those same warm brown eyes that had once pleaded for help in a snowy police station. In them shone a devotion that needed no words, a testament to the extraordinary power of compassion, and the unbreakable bond between a man and the dog who gave him a second chance at life.